Which day it was raining outside. It calmed down for a couple of minutes, only to burst into icy streams again very soon. The weather was to match the mood. Natasha could not pull herself together. I didn't even think that after 30 things could change so dramatically. More recently, everything was stable and calm, without incident, but still. But those very adventures were skillfully created by the mother-in-law. Kostya was her only and dearly beloved son. The appearance of a competitor, even if in the person of her son's wife, Elena Vladimirovna, took it hard. Even 10 years later, she was looking for an opportunity to tell how lucky she was to be a simple girl from the village to meet such an intelligent and promising guy as her Kostya. What is the prospect? Natasha did not understand. They took a mortgage on the apartment and paid it together. Her parents helped even more than her mother-in-law. Yes, and the work of Natalia brought more income. Kostya was looking for something suitable for his exceptional abilities. But there were no such people. So I changed firms and companies like gloves. They didn't look at it that way. They didn't give me a vacation after a month of work, and Natalia worked all the time in one place. Gradually deserved authority, mastered all the basics, and slowly but the career went uphill along with the salary. It just so happened that Kostya was her first and only man, so there was no one to compare with, and from the first meetings the girl began to take everything for granted. Since Kostya said so, so be it. He is older, smarter, and knows better. Everything was not bad in his stability. He was upset by one child in the family. At first, it didn't bother me at all. The job was an apartment, loans, but lately my husband has become more and more interested in why Natalia still hasn't given him an heir. The woman quickly realized that she could not do without her beloved mother-in-law. Kostya himself was never particularly attracted to children, and since such a question arose on the agenda, it means that the necessary grandchildren became the husband's mother. Natalia herself really wanted a baby, but the doctors only shrugged. The analyses are normal, there are no problems, everything should work out, but it didn't work out. They invited Kostya for examination, but he got nervous, began to scandal that everything was in order for his suspicion, so the problem was in her alone. How should he know? Natasha did not ask again. She was used to believing everything that her husband says. So the question remained at the stage of freezing. I reassured myself that, most likely, the stars had not yet converged and still would. For a while, everything calmed down, to return again. Natasha looked out the window of her favorite cafe. People were in a hurry to take shelter from the rain, but she can already take her time. Yesterday Kostya met her with packed bags at the door. The decision was stunned, they were not destined to be together. She is empty, he will not be able to give birth to children, which means there is no need to be together. He files for divorce, the coffee is cold, and the woman did not even notice this. A pleasant voice distracted her from gloomy thoughts. The young man asked if he could sit down. Natalia nodded. The downpour and bad weather drove many into the cafe. There were no empty tables. She glanced at the neighbor who appeared, handsome, tall, with attentive gray eyes. Eyes attracted the most, forcing you to involuntarily shudder in such, and you can drown. The acquaintance that the guy tried to make did not work out. The last thing she wanted to do was talk, so after a couple of minutes she got up and silently nodded to the gray-eyed man, goodbye. Genuine regret flickered across his face. Then Natasha did not yet know that very soon they would meet again. In the meantime, all thoughts were occupied with a vague future. At work, she took a vacation, her head still didn't think well. At home, I pressed everything. Kostya has not yet taken all the things, so she constantly stumbled. On his slippers, then on the bathrobe in the bathroom. Now Natasha understood that it was not love, but rather a painful affection, but it didn't get easier yet. She dialed her aunt, deciding to get distracted and visit family in the suburbs. Anastasia Petrovna, the sister of her mother who died early, immediately realized that there was a special reason for the unexpected appearance of her niece. You can't interrogate Natasha to come even for a day, but then she decided herself, and even on vacation. The equation developed quickly, so without any preface, the aunt reported. "I never liked your husband, you know, come here today, especially since we have news here." Indeed, there were changes. The region was famous for its springs, and then it occurred to someone to make analyses of water samples. The water turned out to be with some healing elements. There was also someone who undertook to develop the direction. And now a sanatorium was being built here, in which many people would gather. The work was in full swing, the process went quickly. Walking along the bank of a fast river, Natalia seemed to plunge into childhood. Here they were going with Mom strawberries, and here chamomile. I didn't notice how I came close to the equipment working at the construction site. "Girl, where are you going to be more careful?" Natasha seemed to wake up, emerging from her memories. The same cafe neighbor was looking at her from above, whose eyes were so memorable, it was clear that he recognized her too. Seriousness was replaced by surprise and joy. "It's you. But as you are here," word by word, a conversation and acquaintances began. Sergei turned out to be the same investor who was involved in the development of sources. He told with inspiration how great it is that this water can help people, and for the village it will only be a plus since there are many visitors, which means that there will be income for people. Again, jobs will appear. Natalia herself did not notice how carried away by his story. Sergei was on fire with ideas, and it was contagious. The locals were happy. The guy turned out to be intelligent, and the most important thing was thinking about nature and people, and not just about how much money the sanatorium would bring. The man, without any modesty, said that this time he would not let Natalia go just like that. He was offended that during their last meeting she looked at him so sternly that he became shy. That's why he did not hurry after her, but really wanted to. Nothing and no one, now not connected, Natalia herself wanted these meetings. It seemed to her that they had known each other for ages. It was calm from Sergei, and he simply listened attentively to everything she was talking about. He even liked her offer to leave the natural lake. For the woman herself, this was new. Her husband never took her seriously, he considered her almost a blonde fit only for dinner and bed. And here they discussed serious issues on an equal footing, and it was clear that Serioza was not disingenuous, considering her ideas worthy. They saw each other almost every day, and Natasha began to think bitterly that the vacation was not rubber, and she would have to return to the city, and then Kostya began to call. First from afar, and then directly said that they paid the mortgage together, which means that he was entitled to half. The apartment must be sold and the money divided. Apparently, Elena Vladimirovna began to get bored with her beloved son. It's one thing to lead from a distance, but quite another when he is with you all the time. Accustomed to devote time only to themselves, the former teacher was not ready for the return of an adult child, and therefore housing was needed. Sergei immediately realized that something had happened. I had to tell everything as it is. He even volunteered to go to the city with Natalia, but she refused. She will do everything herself. It's time to put an end to that part of life. At work, everyone appreciated the changes that had happened to her. Fresh air and the absence of stress restored her complexion. In addition, Natalia was very light tan. All was good. But she desperately missed Sergei. I didn't even think that he would hook her heart so much, but he didn't call. And the woman decided that for a wealthy businessman, she was just a small exciting episode. She was disappointed again. Sergei appeared suddenly, just called the new apartment, and Natalia didn't even ask how he found out the address. She already understood that if he needed something, he would find a bunch of ways to find and get it. Gray eyes were now dark, and cheekbones played. He was clearly gathering his courage, and that was unsettling. Mentally, Natalia was ready to hear that the relationship was a mistake, and it was time for them to leave, something like that. "Natasha, we need to have a serious talk," Sergei began. And her heart skipped a beat. Well, that's how she thought, and then, not paying attention to the quiet sigh, he began to speak. He conducted a monologue without waiting for an answer. He really wants her to always be there. Natalia herself did not notice that she had become the center of his life, and he would have given everything to be with her. But there is one thing, he was already married and not very successfully. His wife left him, driving off with a new boyfriend abroad, and left her little daughter. Yes, he was afraid to tell Natalia that he was the father. Masha, 3 years old. And he will understand if Natasha refuses the relationship, but he loves if she agrees to try, she asks to marry him. Natalia did not understand crying or laughing. That night they talked until the morning, she also had something to tell, and what secrets to reveal. The divorce has not yet been completed, but Natalia and Sergei have already decided everything. Masha turned out to be very similar to her father. The same huge gray eyes and pleasant features. After looking at the new person for a minute, the girl narrowed her eyes. "Will you be my mom?" Natalia didn't even wipe her tears from her eyes. Is it possible that after all that she had to go through and she can feel like a mother, the baby accepted her unconditionally? She did not remember her own mother, and she liked it very much. The woman was swallowed up by a new life, and the unpleasant process of divorce and the prickly glances of the former mother-in-law passed by. Natasha was too happy to let someone ruin her life. In addition, a real family was waiting for her on the street in front of the courthouse, and she had already promised her daughter a trip to the park. They did not return to the city. Sergei noticed how Natalia liked his house in the village and offered to quit her job until she decided on this one, but the office agreed that she would work remotely. Financial matters are quite accessible online, and a couple of times a month she will be able to come to take the necessary papers and solve other issues. It seemed that life could not be better, overshadowed one thing, excitement and events had a little effect on health. Unpleasant sensations of nausea almost did not leave. The road became a test. This could not be hidden from Sergei's attention. "Natalia, do you want to do a pregnancy test?" Slyly, smiling, worried her beloved. "You know it's impossible," the doctors said. The doctors then said that everything was fine with you, but your ex-husband, as I understand it, did not pass the examination. When the doctor congratulated Natalia, she could not believe it. The brain refused to accept the news. Kostya convinced her for so long that she was to blame for everything, that she believed. And now it turned out that Maria was pregnant and took the information with delight and bombarded her with questions. And when? Who? They crossed paths with the former only a couple of months later, when there was nothing left until the birth of their son. After another inspection by the whole family, they decided to look into the park and came face to face with their ex-husband. He failed to hide his emotions, without looking up, and he looked only at Natalia's big belly. Of course, he was surprised by Sergei, who carefully held Natasha by the arm, and the little girl who called her mother. It seemed to the woman that she distinctly heard how Kostya's cerebral convolutions creaked, trying to put together puzzles. Nothing came of it, and he frowned. Natalia herself did not explain anything. To whom, why, giving a minute so that he could examine everything, nodded slightly, and left with her beloved family. Kostya remained standing in the middle of the alley, looking after them. He wanted to go home quickly. He had to tell his mother everything, because this simply could not be. Natalia also wanted to go home, but for a completely different reason. They still need to put a crib and prepare everything for a future joyful event. Only happiness and love await them ahead, because everyone in this life chooses their own path, and they have already chosen theirs.